She starts hearing her name being whispered and she's less concerned than she should be. I think she follows this voice that she has yet to see a face for. So that's creepy. Like, why is this voice calling you and you just so happen to end up in the dead guy's bedroom? Hello everybody and welcome back to Chloe's Old. I'm Chloe and here I cover movies, mysteries, and everything mystic. So keeping with the theme of last time, I'm going to share another story that's also about a paranormal love story because it seems to be my genre. Today's story is very special to me because it was the story that inspired me to start writing music based off of entertainment. As well as that, the song that I wrote based on this story was the first piano song I had ever written. Well, the first one with lyrics, so that was also very fun. So I hope you guys all enjoy this story as well. So this story was actually a novel written by Yang Shi-chu, and I have it here. It's so good. I have yet to finish reading it, but I really want to, but I did watch the show. I hope they continue to make more of her novels into shows because they're just so good. I also really love today's story because it's based in Malaysia, and so there's a lot of cultural aspects that I didn't know prior to watching the show that I had a good time researching, and I hope you guys all find it interesting as well because I will be explaining some of them in this video. So get ready. So to start off, we have our main character, a girl called Lilan, and Lilan, she lives with her family in Malaysia. We're in the 1890s. City called Malacca, and I hope I said that right. But anyways, Lilan, she's 20 years old. She lives with her dad. Her mother unfortunately passed away. She was younger, but they also have some servants in the house. They have an older lady who they call Ama, and then they have a cook as well. So it's not too lonely in the house. The story starts off, Lilan wakes up from this horrible nightmare and she's got like these black veins that start spreading and crawling all over her. But she wakes up and Ama is there and she's like, "Get up, you've already wasted another morning, be productive." Lilan gets up and she's like, oh. Okay, and she makes her way down to the kitchen and we see her dad, and her dad's got his newspaper and he's reading through. He's a businessman. He's looking, I guess, how business is doing in other parts of the world. And then her and Ama go down to the market, and this market is so beautiful and it's very lively. There's so many people there, and there's little shops everywhere and people who have trades from overseas. And Lilan, she just loves the atmosphere. They're just looking around, and suddenly Lilan's eyes kind of wander over to a specific poster, and this poster is talking about the Qixi festival, which, if you don't know what Qixi festival is, I will insert a clip of me going on a tangent about it here. You're welcome. So the Qixi festival it's a lover's festival. It takes place on the 7th day of the 7th month. It comes from Chinese mythology, where basically these two gods, I think they were gods, they were in love, but they were forced to not see each other because they were causing some issues. But they are allowed to see each other on one day of the year, one day of the lunar calendar, which was the 7th day of the 7th month. And that's kind of how this whole festival started, and it's celebrated not only in China but also in Japan. In Japan it's called the Tanabata festival, which is really fun, and every country kind of has their own traditions and ideas surrounding it. If you want to learn more, I really suggest checking out because it's really fun. I'm not sure in China, but I know in Japan a lot of times they make origami characters of the gods, and they write down their wishes on it and they hang it on bamboo trees. Especially I heard it in Sendai, which is a city in Japan. It's really famous for its Tanabata festival. So that's the Qixi festival that she's referring to. So then, after Lilan sees this poster, Ama's eyes kind of also wander over and see the poster, and Ama turns to Lilan like, "You know, you're already 20 years old. Shouldn't you be thinking about getting married?" And Lilan, she hates this idea. She does not want to get married because she explains she believes that getting married would be too much of a responsibility, and she wants to have her freedom, and she wants to travel, and she wants to do all of these things, but she can't do that if she's married. And Ama's like, "Oh, it's not like that." She tries to convince her, but then one of Lilan's friends from before comes in, and her name's Yuli. And Lilan hasn't seen her in forever, and so they get really excited and they're trying to catch up. But unfortunately, Yuli, she says she has a baby to take care of and she can't talk right now. And so Lilan just turns over to Ama and is like, I told you. And so Ama's like, oh. And then Ama says, okay, well, what if Tianbai asked for your marriage? And so you can already tell that Lilan definitely likes whoever this Tianbai guy is. And Lilan, she brushes off the question. She doesn't want to answer it, but I think we all know her answer. And then after that, they go to a temple and they're gonna give some offerings to Lilan's mother, some incense and some food. And while they're there, they kind of look around and they see some servants giving offerings to somebody who recently passed away. And they look at the nameplate and it says Lim Tianqing. And this name immediately catches both of their eyes because it was somebody that Lilan had grown up with and he was quite young, and so they're very surprised that he had passed away. And Ama says, oh, like, do you want to go say hi to him, say your piece? And Lilan says no, she does not want to at all. And so they go home that night for dinner, and her father receives this letter, and they're all waiting for him to open it and see what it is. And he opens it, and it's an invitation to the Qixi festival that I had mentioned earlier. The Lim family was throwing a party, and it was a direct invitation from them. And it's the same Lim family as in the guy we just saw who had passed away, the Lim Tianqing, his family. And so everybody's really confused because the Lim family is very wealthy, very powerful. They have business overseas and they're just doing very well for themselves. And the Pan family, Lilan's family, they're on rough times. It's not great. And so everybody's just really confused as to why they would be invited to such a party. And they're trying to decide, like, should we go? Should we not go? Why did they really invite us? Like, what's going on? They're not too sure. And so then, fast forward, Lilan heads up to bed and Ama goes to Mr. Pan and is like, hey, maybe we can find Lilan a husband at this party. And Mr. Pan, he agrees, and so he gives Ama some money and she goes the next day with Lilan. They go dress shopping together and it's a very sweet scene. You can see that Ama clearly takes a lot of care to Lilan, and it's very sweet considering Lilan doesn't have a mother anymore, and you can just see how much Ama does care for her and vice versa. And so they go and they pick out this beautiful dress, and Ama's doing Lilan's hair and they're getting ready together, and it reminds me of my mom getting me ready for all my school dances. It's just a very sweet scene. So then the family arrives at this party. It's extravagant to say the least. It's inside their house, and this house is huge. It has this huge courtyard where most of the things in the party are, and it's decorated so beautifully, and when you walk in you're greeted by all these dancers and everything is just big. Like, there's dancers, there's food, and there's gotta be at least the population of 3 towns in this party. Like, it is packed and everybody's dressed up very beautifully as well. And so they walk in and they're now even more confused as to why they were invited, and they head inside, and Lilan, she goes off to where the other women are in this embroidery circle. But while she's there, Mrs. Lim comes over and spots out Mr. Pan, and they start talking, and Mr. Pan asks, why did you invite us? Like, I just don't understand. And Mrs. Lim explains that, well, you know, they had known each other before and they were old friends, and why not? Like, this would be a good time to catch up. And Mr. Pan also, he kind of hinted at, like, why are you throwing a party a month after your son died? Like, it's a little odd. And Mrs. Lim explains once again, she says that her son really enjoyed parties and this was kind of her last party for him, in a way. It was a gift to him. And so Mr. Pan is like, oh, okay, well, I guess that makes sense. And then Mrs. Lim goes off to Lilan, and Lilan, she's very frustrated at this embroidery circle because she's looking around and all the other girls have like these beautiful huge flowers, and she's looking at hers and she's like, this is not for me. So she gets up and she tosses her embroidery and she's like, oh, just leave. And Mrs. Lim kind of jokes about it with her and then heads off somewhere as well. And so Lilan's going and she's kind of exploring through the party, and she starts hearing her name being whispered, and she's less concerned than she should be, I think. And she just keeps hearing her name and somebody calling her to come and like telling her directions, and she follows this voice that she has yet to see a face for, which I feel like if I was in her situation, I probably would have also followed the voice, but I think I would have been a little scared, and she just doesn't seem scared. She's just like curious, I guess. And so she continues following this voice, and she ends up in this room, and she looks up, and then there's this huge portrait of Tianqing, the guy that died, and there's this altar underneath where they're giving offerings. So that's creepy. Like, why is this voice calling you? You're just so happened to end up in the dead guy's bedroom. That's a little odd, but once again, she's not too concerned about that for whatever reason, I don't know. But what she is concerned about is she hears servants coming and she does not want to be seen in here. And so she goes to hide behind this wall, but when they come in, she's like, oh, what if they come back here? And so she tries to sneak and she sneaks under his bed and she looks, there's just a man under the bed. Like, she gasps and she almost screams and he covers her mouth like this. And then once the servants finally leave, they both roll out from under the bed and they get up and Lilan's like, who are you? And the guy's like, I could ask you the same question. And so Lilan introduces herself as Lilan of the Pan family, a very influential family. She tries to make herself seem more important than her family actually is. And she asks the guy, she's like, who are you? And he says his name's Erlan and he's a servant of the Lim family. And so they both kind of give each other excuses as to why they were there, but they're not the best of excuses. And so they both decide to part ways and both forget about each other. Lilan also goes off somewhere else once again and she's kind of looking over at this balcony and she hears somebody say her name again, this time not a ghost, and it's Tianbai. Tianbai is back. So we kind of learned that Tianbai has been in Hong Kong for a while. We're not sure how long, and the two were really good friends before he left. And Lilan's so excited that he's back and they start to catch up and things are going really well and there's like maybe a little flirting, maybe not. And then this guy comes over and is like, oh, Tianbai, this must be your fiance, right? And Lilan's just like, what? And Tianbai quickly like brushes this off and says, oh no, this is my childhood friend, and goes off with this guy. He never really explains, but he's just let Lilan alone, and now she's like, oh my god, the guy that I've liked since forever has a fiance now and did not tell me. So then we get to see Mr. Pan again. He's sitting down with Ama, and Mrs. Lim comes over again and she starts telling him, hey, I heard things aren't going too well with the business, you know, that's sad to hear, is there anything I can do, stuff like that. And Mr. Pan assures her like, no, it's fine. And we find out that his business, he owns a spice business, so I guess he goes out and collects new spices and makes new mixtures and sells them in the market, presumably. It doesn't really go into much detail, but that's what he does. And so then Mrs. Lim goes on about Lilan. She's like, you know, your daughter, she's so beautiful, she's so kind, and I would just really love if she could marry into our family. And Ama's eyes light up and she's so excited because Tianbai, the guy that Lilan has a crush on, is also part of the Lim family. He's like a cousin, I believe. And so Ama's like, oh my god, I have to go tell Lilan. Like, she's gonna be so excited. She can finally get to marry this guy. But Mrs. Lim quickly shuts it down and is like, no. And so everybody's confused once again. And Mrs. Lim explains she can marry Tian Qing. And so they're all looking at each other at this table like, did we hear that right? Did she just suggest that Lilan marry a dead guy? And Mrs. Lim explains that Lilan could go on to be a ghost bride, and I will insert another clip of me going on a rant about ghost brides. So what exactly is a ghost bride? So this question, it's a little difficult. It depends on where you're at. There's some different types, but for this story it kind of goes along with China's idea of it, and I believe ghost brides may have originated from China. I'm not sure on that. So basically this idea, this tradition, I guess you could call it, came from a time when the death rates were much higher, and there was a lot of specifically sons from wealthy and influential, powerful families who were passing away while unmarried. And this was a problem because at this time there was a lot of people who held the belief that when you die with your spouse that you can go and take care of each other in the afterlife, but if you die unmarried, you're kind of just left alone forever. And obviously these people did not want that for their children, and so they started ghost brides. So the son of this powerful family would die and basically be left alone in the afterlife, and so they would go and they would find a girl who was unmarried and they would marry the two together. And so when the girl eventually died years later, that she could go up and, you know, take care of their son. And sometimes they did not let her live, sometimes they did, and sometimes they didn't. It just depends on your luck, I guess. Not sure, but that's what a ghost bride is. It's basically somebody who could go and take care of their kid once they also died, so that their kid wouldn't be left alone forever in the afterlife. So after that whole conversation, the Pan family is very offended and they get up and they leave. But Mrs. Lim, she tries to bribe them and she tries to say, you know, my family is very powerful. We have a lot of money. If Lilan did marry into our family, if she married Tianqing, then she, you know, she wouldn't really have to do anything and she could just be a part of the family and have all this power and fame and money as well. And the Pan family disagrees. They reject this offer and they go home, and Lilan's very confused because she did not hear this conversation at all and she just got whisked away back home from the party. And so they arrive home and Mr. Pan explains to her what had happened, which I'm honestly surprised he did, but I guess there was a little explaining that had to be done. And so once again, Lilan is not as concerned as I think she should be. And she's just asked, okay, but if I did marry him, would that not help us? And Mr. Pan's like, he's crushed. He's very disappointed that his daughter would even think of that. And he explains to her, I will not let my daughter marry and become a ghost bride because your life will be miserable. You'll have to just mourn him all day, every day until you die. I just don't wish that on anyone, let alone my own child, you know? And so Lilan's like, okay, and she kind of heads off to bed. But that night, she has another nightmare, and it's Tianqing comes into her nightmare and just calls her name. She wakes up panicked and is just like, what's going on? So later that night, Lilan's dad decides to write a letter to the family, his family, like Lilan and Ama, and explains that he's going to be going on a 3-day business trip to go find new spices, and he just runs out in the middle of the night and everybody wakes up very concerned and they're like, so then later that day, Yuli, her friend from before, comes over and they start to catch up and hang out. And Yuli tells Lilan, she's like, did you hear Tianbai's back in town? And Lilan says that she did go see him, but she doesn't really go into much detail. And we learn that Tianbai has been gone for 5 years and they have literally had no contact within those 5 years. And so then as they're talking about him, there's a knock on the door and Lilan goes to answer the door and it's Tianbai. And Tianbai says that he wants to talk to Lilan's father because he's brought him some spices from Hong Kong. And Lilan explains that her father's not here right now, but thank you. And Tianbai says, okay, well, can we go on a walk to catch up? And Lilan's like, I would love to, but Yuli's here right now. And Yuli, she's the best wing woman. She rushes in. She's like, I'm leaving. I don't have time for this. Like, you two go on a walk. And so Yuli, she runs out of this house, leaving Lilan and Tianbai. And so they go on this walk together, catching up and kind of talking about how things ended 5 years ago. And I guess Lilan had given Tianbai a book before he left. And inside this book was a love letter confessing her love to him. And he tries to hint at it, but Lilan pushes him away because she had just heard the night before that he has a fiance and she does not want any part of that. He tries to give her this other gift and he's like, well, you know, you gave me a gift, so I'm gonna give you a gift. And Lilan's like, that was 5 years ago. That was not like last night. No. And she does not accept his gift. So after her walk with Tianbai, she goes home and she finds the cook is rushing with this like warm bowl of water and he looks very frantic and Lilan's like, what's going on? Her dad had returned back from the trip already. He hadn't even been gone like a day and he was deathly ill, like unconscious. And the doctor was there and he was saying it doesn't look too good, but you know, if you give him this medicine, maybe it'll be better. And so Lilan's distraught. And because that's her only surviving parent right now, that's her only family member that she has, she just doesn't know what to do. And so that night she's checking up on him and she falls asleep and Tianqing enters her dream again and basically says like, hey, I wasn't done talking to you. Like, are you gonna accept my marriage proposal or not? And so she's freaked out and she wakes up again and she runs and she tells Ama what's been happening. And so Ama gets very concerned, but she does have a friend that works as a servant in the Lim house. And so her and Lilan go and they go in to see the servant and ask some questions. And the servant explains that nobody at the Lim house has had any dreams like that at all. And she suggests they go see an exorcist. And so Ama and Lilan, they go see this exorcist. And the exorcist explains that because Lilan had left her embroidery embroidery there, the one that she got frustrated with and threw it, that it had worked as a door between her world and Tianqing's world, and now Tianqing was using this embroidery as kind of a gateway to Lilan. And so they're very concerned. They're like, how do I stop this? And the Exorcist explains that they have to break that connection. So I thought they were going to have to like go sneak into Lim's house and like get the embroidery back, but no. The Exorcist gives them this talisman and he says to hang it above her wall, and that when she goes to sleep that night, it should be all good. It was not all good. She goes to sleep that night and has an even worse nightmare, and Tianqing basically comes to life and is still like, come on, like, are you accepting my marriage proposal or not? And he's not giving up at all, and he's very aggressive about it, and he shows up as not a pleasant sight. He seems aggressive, but you can't tell, is he mean or is he just resentful or what exactly is going on? And then he just drops a bomb and says that he was murdered, and Lilan's like, what? Because she had been told that he just died from an illness. And apparently it was not an illness. Tianqing explains that he had been poisoned. And so Lilan's like, okay, like, sorry? But then Tianqing tries to bribe her. He says, you know, I saw your dad's soul wandering. And Lilan's like, what does that mean? And so Tianqing explains that when a soul is wandering, they're either dead or half dead. In Lilan's dad's case, he's half dead. His soul is wandering, and if it doesn't go back to his body, then he will die. And Lilan's freaking out, and she's like, well, you have to help him. You're the only one who can see him. Like, why can't you help? And Tianqing basically saying he won't do anything without a price, and he wants her hand in marriage. And Lilan's like, no. Like, is there another way? I'm not doing that way. And Tianqing, he doesn't give up on it, and so Lilan suggests, okay, well, if you were murdered, do you know who did it? And Tianqing says no. And so Lilan's like, okay, well, I'll find your murderer and you can get my dad back and we'll be good to go. And Tianqing says no. And so Lilan's like, what do you mean? And Tianqing says he's more interested in revenge. And so Lilan's like, okay, but you can't do revenge unless you know who did it, so why don't I help you, and then you can go get your revenge and I'll have my dad back. And so Tianqing does agree to this, but he says she only has 10 days. And Lilan's like, in what world is 10 days enough? And Tianqing explains, okay, well, your dad only has 10 days, and if he doesn't enter his body in 10 days, then he'll die for real. And so Lilan's like, okay, you know what, I accept. And so she's like, if I'm going to solve this, I need to know what happened, so explain. And so Tianqing goes on and he says that the day started out as normal. At dinner, they all had dinner together as normal as well. But afterwards, the servant served him tea. And a little while after drinking this tea, he became very feverish, and he said he wouldn't stop vomiting, and then he became unconscious and he passed away. Lilan's like, okay, who was there? And it literally everybody's there. The whole family's there. All the servants are there. Like, it literally could have been anyone. But Tianqing says he suspects someone. So Lilan's like, okay, who? And Tianqing says that he believes Tianbai poisoned him, so that Tianbai could be the sole heir of the Lim family and receive all the money, all the power, all the fame, and he didn't want to share with Tianqing, so he murdered him. And so Lilan's like, what? She's shocked. And that's where episode 1 ends. And I think for this month's video, I'm just gonna do episode 1 because since it is a series, there's a lot more content. I believe it's like over 6 hours of content, and I don't want this video to be too long. But if you do want me to cover the other episodes, please let me know. And thank you so much for watching once again, and I will link my song down below that I made based off of this show, and I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you enjoyed this video. And go check out Ghost Bride and Yang Chu's books. She's really amazing and I love her work, so thank you. Bye.